All right, so the next method that we ran into was the quadratic formula. And so if you don't remember the quadratic formula, this is it. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, there is a song if you're like really wanting to memorize it, but like not a singer. Those days are over for me. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you notice where they go in the quadratic formula. What I mean by that is if it helps you with color on here, just for organization purposes. I know I used to use it, colored pencils when I did the quadratic. It does get a lot after a while. First thing that we always have to do is check and make sure that it's in standard form. So just a reminder on what standard form looks like. So if it's not in standard form, you need to make sure that it's in standard form. So we're going to subtract 3 and move it to the other side. And that's going to give us 3n squared minus 3 equals 0. All right, so as we're looking at this, we notice that there is an a term. It's right here. There is a c term, but there's no b. In this instance, b is going to equal 0 because there's nothing in between here and here. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to substitute in. So that's going to give us, I'm going to try to color coordinate this, negative 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4 times my a value, which is 3, times c, which is negative 3, all over 2 times my a, which is 3. All right, and remember that's a lot of color for some of y'all, but for others it's helpful. So on this next part, you're going to simplify what's on the outside, then you're going to simplify what's on the inside and what's on the bottom. So I always call this step the outside, inside, bottom step. So if I take this, negative 0 can just be simplified to 0. So I don't even have to write that. I don't have to include it in my answer. But I am going to write that positive, negative, and the square root. Well, 0 squared is going to give me 0. Negative 4 times 3. And I always do this part in my calculator just to make sure that I don't mess this up. So I take negative 4 times 3 times negative 3. And I hit enter. Notice how I use that negative button down here, and I did not use the subtraction button. Those are two totally different things. I know the person who invented that was the devil. Okay, so that's going to give us 36. And in the bottom, you're going to have 2 times 3, which is going to give us 6. So now what you're going to do is add the stuff that's underneath the radical. So 0 plus 36 is just going to give us a positive 36 underneath here. And then you've got 6 on the bottom. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to simplify what's on the top. So if you took the square root of 36, you're going to get 6. So that's going to give you positive or negative 6 in the top divided by 6. Well, 6 divided by 6 is going to give us positive or negative 1. Okay, so for this, since it said solve, we're going to have our answer be x equals 1 and x equals negative 1. So go ahead, pause the video, and try number 10, and then check your work in just 1 second. All right, so on number 10, we want to make sure that it's in standard form first. So we're going to move everything to one side. So we're going to subtract 9x and add 6. And again, you can move this to the other side if it makes you feel comfortable. I personally don't like having an a term that is negative. That's just my prerogative. Okay, so I'm going to have 3x squared minus 9x plus 6 equals 0. I'm going to identify my a, b, and c, and then I'm going to plug it into the formula. So one of the great things about the quadratic formula is solely the fact that it's really simple to plug in. But what's terrible about the quadratic formula is that you can make a lot of errors very, very, very quickly, and it can go down south really, really bad. So with that being said, I personally do not use the quadratic formula ever. I like to factor. But that being said, some of y'all do like it. You just got to make sure you simplify correctly. And if you're constantly making the same mistake, you got to fix it early on. Otherwise, it's just going to ruin all of your answer choices. All right, so again, this step is simplify the outside, inside, and bottom. So on the outside, I've got a negative and a negative, which is going to make a positive 9. Over here, I've got a square root. Negative 9 squared is going to give me positive 81, and the reason why it's going to be positive is because a negative times a negative gives us a positive. So remember, with that squared, if the negative's inside that parentheses, we're going to have a positive answer at the bottom. Okay? And then down here, we've got negative 4 times 3 times 6, which is going to give us negative 72, over 2 times 3, which is 6. So we can still simplify what's underneath that radical. So we've got 81 minus 72, which is going to give us 9. Okay, so 9 plus or minus the square root of 9, all over 6. So if we take the square root of 9, that's going to give us 3. So we're going to have 9 plus or minus 3 over 6. So this breaks down into two different problems. So this now becomes 9 plus 3 over 6, and then it also becomes 9 minus 3 over 6. So 9 plus 3 is going to give us 12. 12 divided by 6 is going to give us 2. 9 minus 3 is going to give us 6. 6 divided by 6 is going to give us 1. So our answers are x equals 2 and x equals 1. And theoretically, you should be able to plug this back in to this equation and make that statement true. But your girl does not like having to plug back in. So what I do is I go into that y equals button and I type my formula that's right here. I get 3x squared minus 9x plus 6. And I'm going to hit that graph button. And it's going to show me that on the x-axis, it actually crosses at the points x equals 1 and x equals 2. So also on here with the table, if you hit second graph, you're going to notice at x equals 1, your y is 0. When x equals 2, your y is also 0. So those are your x-intercepts that are right there. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try number 11. And I'm going to work through that one pretty quickly. So, alright, so on this one, you got to make sure that you've got it in standard form. Remember, standard form is that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so you want to move that 22 to the other side. Anybody else feel that Taylor Swift vibes? Alright, so then you're going to identify your A, B, and C. And then you're going to substitute in. So you're going to have negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared minus 4 times, and I'm going to do this all in one color, so sorry for my visual people, but you got it, I believe in you. Right? So when I simplify this, I'm going to get, my outside is already simplified, so I'm going to have that negative 7 plus or minus the square root. 7 squared is going to give me 49. And I'm going to go to my calculator, because, yeah. Alright, so I'm going to have negative 4 times 6 times negative 22, which is going to give me 528. On the bottom, I'm going to have 12. So I'm going to simplify what's underneath the radical. So I've got negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 528. And that's going to give me 577 over 12. I'm going to see if taking the square root of 577 gives me a perfect square. It doesn't. So here's the issue. You now have to simplify that or put it in its simplest form, which hopefully you revisited the whole simplifying radicals. But if you didn't, one second. There are no like perfect squares that I can take out from this that's going to make this any simpler. So this is probably going to be your answer on this one. So it's going to be x equals -7 plus or minus the square root of 577 divided by 12. And then it's going to have that negative version. So something to just keep in mind with that. One thing I want to mention before we kind of continue on, if you ever have a negative underneath the radical, there is a negative underneath the radical, then you're going to have no real solution. You're going to have one of these on your test. It's going to happen. So make sure that you're paying attention to it. Not the fact that there's a negative on the outside, but on the inside of the square root, if it's a negative number, then you're going to have no real solution. All right, so go ahead and pause the video and try number 12. Okay, so on this one, you want to make sure that it's in standard form. So I'm going to actually move that 5v squared to the other side. So this will give me -5v squared minus 6v plus 2. All right, so now I'm going to plug into a formula. So I've got -6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared minus 4 times -5 times 2 all over 2 times -5. Look at that handwriting. Who let me be a teacher? Okay, so now I'm going to simplify what's on the outside, the inside, and the denominator. So on the outside, I'm going to have +6. Underneath the radical, I'm going to have +36. And then I'm going to take -4 times -5 times 2. So that's going to give me +40 all over -10. Okay, so now we're going to simplify what's under here. So that's going to give us 6 plus or minus the square root of 76 divided by -10. And with this negative, we're going to take this guy and actually pull him out to the front, because otherwise this looks real awkward. So we're going to make this -6. And then, can we simplify this 76? Is there a perfect square that is a factor of 76, or can we leave this guy alone? Well, let's look at our factors. No. So I don't see any perfect squares. That's talking that 1, 4, 16, etc. So this guy can just stay right there. And everything else is fine as is. So this would be your final answer. And remember, there's 2 answer choices embedded in here. So you've got that -6 plus the square root of 76 divided by 10, and then -6 minus the square root of 76 divided by 10. Again, quadratic formulas should not be the first thing that you use, but it is always going to work. It just allows you to make a lot more errors. Okay, so